welcome to this episode of BookSmarts, Authors on Show, a creation of Clarissa Burt, founder of In the Limelight Media. I am your show host, Christina Francie, and today I am thrilled to be interviewing Michaela Canterbury, who is a lawyer and a writer. Michaela obtained her law degree in Gonzaga University School of Law in Spokane, Washington, and graduated from Duquesne University in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, with a bachelor's of arts in political science and a minor in philosophy. Michaela is licensed to practice law in Alaska and is owner, operator, and lead trial lawyer at Kelly and Canterbury LLC, where she works with her husband, Christopher, partner in all things. Michaela resides in Eagle River, Alaska with Christopher, where they raise their son, daughter, and dogs in the same valley and woods where she was raised. Michaela, it is such an honor to have you on the show today. I'm really excited to dive into this topic because I think addiction is something that is maybe one person away of who we know. I know a lot of families struggle with that, especially in the times that we live in. And can you explain a little bit more about your book and how you came up with it?
Sure. Yeah, you're so right that addiction touches really everybody. I think there's everybody loves an addict. So this book came into my life. My sister is a recovering addict. She's been in recovery. It'll be 4 years this March. Um, but the book, Sister Siren, a nonfiction about addiction and a field guide on how to love an addict, is really about our family's journey with my sister when she was in active addiction, how we learned about it, and what we did as a family. I come from a family of high functioning professionals. I'm a trial lawyer. My father's a trial lawyer. My husband's a trial lawyer. My mom's a PhD, and my sister was a college athlete and has a master's degree in counseling and a business of her own. And so she was slipping down this slope of addiction, and none of us knew. And we come from a small community, and like the coaches didn't know. The priest didn't know.
Yeah.
None of us knew this was happening. She was so high functioning. And so the book is really about the story of how it surfaced, really, and then how we mobilized to support my sister. And it wasn't easy. So I have resources in my book of what worked for me,
Mhm.
tips and tools. That's why I also call it a field guide on how to love an addict, because it's hard to love an addict.
No, it's hard. I mean, I've experienced it close to my home, and I know a lot of families experience, addiction. And, I would really love to get your insight on how we can support the addicts that you love, during the holidays.
Yes, that's such a good question. It's really um, and it's so timely. There's always something to celebrate, right? And families want to celebrate, whether it's graduations or weddings or different holidays, Easter, Christmas, November for Thanksgiving. Um, and there's been an increase in mental health struggles since post COVID, and economic downfall, social unrest, all that jazz. And so we tend to isolate ourselves, and addiction is already isolating. People already feel isolating. So having tools in your toolbox on how to support the addict, or reach out to the addict. So one is host a sober event, or if you're hosting an event, have some have some options for the addict in your life, and educate yourself on what their addiction is. I mean, for my sister, it was drugs, and she's in a relationship with a recovering alcoholic, and so I know that when she's going to come, let's have some options for her boyfriend, and let's have some options for her, because she's supporting him in his recovery as well. So educate yourself on their addiction, whether it's a food addiction or a gambling addiction. I mean, you don't want to be playing games that are going to trigger,
Yeah.
whatever their addiction is. So educate yourself on their addiction. Also, talk to your addicted loved one directly, and how can we how can I support you? I know this maybe, and what are some of your triggers that I should be mindful of,
Mhm.
excuse me. And then also, if this, then that type talking with the person that you love that struggles with addiction. So if this happens, then that, and then kind of be their accountability partner. Okay, I got you, you got me. And like if you know there's going to be someone that is triggering, or uh, just be mindful of that, and like don't sit them next to them
Yeah.
at the dinner table, okay, when you're sitting down for dinner, or just be mindful of that about how we're going to do the flow of a social event or of a gathering.
Mhm.
So if you know that there's someone who's like antagonistic or would trigger them, just be mindful of that and kind of already think about the flow of your
Yeah.
events that
Get
you're
a game
hosting.
plan down.
Um, yeah, offer to be their account. Yes, exactly. Offer to be their accountability partner. Um, and also, I think it's good to like set goals as a family. If you're having a family gathering, I mean, it doesn't always have to be about food and drink. I mean, it could be something else. I mean, I live in Alaska, so we sled, we skate, we walk in nature a lot. And so there can be gatherings like that, just don't involve the addiction, or what would trigger them. So talk with your family about, different types of events where we can gather and still, nurture our relationship and move our relationship in a way that doesn't involve their addiction or their trigger. So
Mhm.
yeah, there's always a lot of indulgence around celebrations
Yeah.
or the holidays, and so there's just more opportunity for triggers. And so just being mindful of that and having a genuine conversation with the addict you love and your family and the people who are coming. I call those people family. Friends that are family. In Alaska, we have that a lot because we're so far away from everybody, so we have family. And
I love
so just, being real with everybody who's going to be at the event about, hey, this is happening. And so how can we make this so it's not a trigger inducing, stressful situation for this person that we love that struggles with addiction?
No, that's so great. It's so great to just be mindful and also get curious, and that was really great for them to ask the questions. Well, for us to ask the questions for the addict, if not this, then that, and what are some triggers, and it's really great because I think people do need accountability in life, especially struggling with addiction. I think that's probably one of the hardest things to overcome is your addiction. It's something that takes a lot of willpower in the person wanting to change. And so as we are supporting the addicts that we love, like what are some 5 ways that we can support the addict and love them, but without enabling them? Because I know sometimes that can be a fine line for people. They're trying so hard, but then also they can be an enabler. So what are some 5 ways that
Certainly.
we can love them without enabling?
First is showing up. Okay. Show up for the person that you love. Know what your limits are. People use the word boundaries a lot. I kind of think that that's puts a hurdle towards a relationship.
Mhm.
Basically, getting in tune with this is what I can do in this relationship. For me, it was just showing up for my sister.
Yeah.
And I knew, I mean, the limits that I have are different than the limits our mother had. Um, which are different than the limits, different than how my dad could show up, and
Mhm.
different from how my husband could show up. And so, knowing where you personally draw the line, okay, um, showing up for an addict with stuff that's going to help, okay, and having those discussions. I had a discussion with my sister about being her emergency contact. Like, how can I support her? I'm fine with being her emergency contact. And I wanted to make sure that she had a sober person to be her emergency contact. If that's in your bailiwick, then that's in your bailiwick. But again, that's getting in tune with what you can do and how you
Mhm.
can show. I hope I'm not freezing. in any event, another way is when you do show up, bring things that help. So I always carried Narcan in case there was an overdose.
Okay.
I would bring protein foods that
Okay.
were healthy. So I would show up with like smoked salmon or shrimp, granola bars. I would also bring things that I knew that she needed that she probably wasn't able to get herself. I mean, I'm talking about times that I would, Christina, I would like show up at a trap house and know my sister was in there. And what can I bring? So I would bring her phone chargers. I
Right.
would bring her food. I would bring her water. I would bring her first aid kits. I would bring her feminine protection. So know what would help your addict. Now I'm talking about things when they're, on the streets, homeless, that kind of
Yeah.
thing.
Like the
There's
rock.
also ways, yeah, and there's ways to, I mean, I went to uh, open Naranon meetings with her.
Oh, that's
I
great.
offered to do that with her. Now, this is the stuff that I was able to do. And like I said in the beginning, is getting in tune with what you can do. Now I'm not going to lie, there were points where I wanted her recovery more than she did. And
Mhm.
so people could say, hey, that's enabling, Michaela, when I'm like driving through a snowstorm to get her to a doctor's appointment. And she's like, I'm not going. And I'm like, wait, what? I just drove 40 minutes and could have died. But then there's that realization for me that I know, okay, Michaela, step back. You're wanting this more than her and you're not taking care of yourself. That's another thing to do is take care of yourself before you start loving on your addict. Also, waiting for them to ask, as to what they need, you know. So
So
I hope
how
that
can we,
helps.
what are some self-care measures that we can do in order to be that person to show up for to help them, and we're not kind of like killing ourselves in the process as well?
Yeah. What helped, quite frankly, what helped me was I saw a counselor, so I would have a safe space
Hmm.
to um, to to navigate this, a safe container to navigate this, because I couldn't talk, and I wouldn't talk with my kids about it. I
Yeah.
mean, I did, but not the deep, deep, deep
Yeah.
stuff.
Yeah. You just kind
You
of like
know, I
sprinkled the
mean, they
kid-friendly topic about it.
right. I mean, when my sister was in active addiction, my kids were preteens and teenagers in
Mm.
high school. And so, I mean, I had the real discussions about, Auntie can't be here. You can't be going over to Auntie's place. I mean, we had these very real discussions, but the stuff that I was navigating about, the grief and the anger and the resentment and having a place to navigate that, because you have a lot of people telling you what you should do,
Hmm.
and you need to figure that out your own self.
Hmm.
I remember a time in particular, my husband and I, we hike our dogs every morning. Um, and I was sad, very sad about what was going on with my sister. And he's like, you know what you should do? And I'm like, squeeze me? Um, I was like, and it was a kind of an epiphany. My relationship with my sister is my relationship with my sister. No one tells me how I'm going to have that relationship. I'm going to figure that out my own damn self.
Yeah.
And you have a relationship with my sister, and that's for you to navigate. And so that really kind of epitomizes the moment for me, where we each have our own ways that we're going to, what kind of a relationship do we want with this person who's in our lives?
Hmm.
And so the first for me was getting counseling. And then which uh, helped me navigate that. What I knew I couldn't give up on her. That was just a non-negotiable.
Yeah.
The second is there's plenty of support groups for um, whatever the issue is. So I started going to Nar groups, and Nor and I kind of treat those like, don't take this the wrong way, but like being a cafeteria Catholic. You show up and there's another safe place where there's people that know what you're going through. And you don't have to take all the stuff in the group, know, but you're not alone.
Yeah.
And going to those meetings, those support group meetings, remind you that you're not alone. It confirms your feelings, it validates your feelings, and it's just another option where, or another place where you know you're not alone.
Yeah.
And then I started instituting like a morning routine because my mind would just be totally occupied about her addiction and where she was, and when she's homeless and what's happening, and
Yeah.
my mind would go to the scariest places. And so then I started this, and it was so distracting, Christina. I mean, like, I couldn't do my day job as a trial lawyer.
I
I mean, like, I
know.
got a business to run, and my mind is going to, is she killing herself, yada yada, and is she going to get in recovery and rehab and blah blah blah. And I finally had to set, I called it MWBT, morning well-being time. And I would set this time, and I would, like, my biggest fears, that she would die or that she would overdose and I'd have to tell my parents, or I'd have to identify the body, all these
Hmm.
things. I would I would light a candle, and I'd get up before everybody else. I'd light a candle in the morning. I'd set my timer for, however much time I had, and I would contemplate that. Whether it was and I called them red flag feelings, RFFs, red flag feelings, whether it was fear or resentment or anger, and I had them all. And I would set an appointment with all of those, and I would take it to its absolute worst,
Yeah.
you know, and coming eye to eye with those RFFs, fear in particular was the first one I met with. Um, I mean, I went to the place where I wrote her eulogy, I wrote her obituary. I ended up writing mine. I mean, the thing is that way, in the event that that happened, I would be able to show up and articulate the truth of our relationship and the truth of what happened without being a basket case. And so that was a self-care measure that I still practice to this day. And then I do an evening wind up, and I call it I call it the rose rule. And for every thorn of the day, right?
Hmm.
For every thorn of the day, I come up with three petals, because there's more petals on a rose than there are thorns. And so I kind of go through my this the day. Some people call it a gratitude list, but I can't help thinking about what the heck went wrong today,
Yeah, I know, right? It's
But
so
also,
easy to go negative.
right, right, especially for me,
Yeah.
So for every thorn that would pop into my head, I force myself to come up with three petals and find the blessings in that, so I could reframe it for the next day. Because I, I learned that I can't go to sleep on those thorns, because then they inform the next day.
Hmm.
So setting up a morning routine that is healthy and good for you, also walking in nature, I highly recommend it. I know, like, there's people who are urban, but find your park, find your place.
Hmm.
Also meditation was a good one. So those are some. Oh, and I also did a detox bath
What's that?
in
The
the
detox
evening.
bath.
Oh my God, it's wonderful.
Oh,
So
give me the deets.
yeah, yeah. So hot water, Epsom salts,
Mm.
with baking soda and some drops of lavender, and just soak for as long as you can tolerate. And that's also a really nice way to, like, go into, this is before bed, to ease into bed. And I also do the 3-2-1 rule. So stop eating 3 hours before bed, um, and no work 2 hours before bed, and then no electronics 1 hour before bed. In fact, to put the phone in another room. And I did that because I knew I was getting these texts and these calls from
It's
her and
overwhelming.
other people, and the phone started to be a trigger for me.
Yeah.
Like, I would be scared. My heart would go, and so I had to develop techniques that would protect me from that.
Hmm. Yeah.
So I
Yeah,
did.
I know when when the people that we love are struggling like that, it can be all consuming, And like you said, it was interfering with your work life. I mean, your just being at home life, you were, having anxiety if your like text messages went off, like, is that her? Is this the day? But I really loved how you mentioned the thorn and then the three petals and you give it the blessing. I think that is a really beautiful way to look at the good with the thorns that had happened in the day. And the 3-2-1 rule is really an amazing one too. So thank you so much for sharing those.
You're welcome.
So, um, so what are 5 things not to do with an addict? Like, what shouldn't we do when our loved ones are in that frame of mind or in that lifestyle?
Yeah. Okay. Don't give them cash. It's going to go to drugs. Okay. Don't sign any contracts with them. Okay. So don't sign any rental contracts or because that's all going to come back.
Yeah, yeah.
Uh,
Don't be co-signing.
right. Um, and don't tell them what to do.
Mm,
That's a big one. Okay. And that also goes when you love someone who loves an addict. Like if you have a close friend or a family member. Remember, I told you about the walk with my husband?
yeah.
It's like, and everybody has opinions, but they're not walking your shoes.
Yeah, they don't
We're not
see
walking their
through your
shoes either.
eyes, and the relationship is different. It's your sister and it's his sister-in-law. So, I mean, it is very different because you love your sister so much and you would do anything for her to have a happy, healthy life. So it means more to you than probably to him.
It's different.
Yeah.
Yeah. Their relationship is different. I mean, I've known her a whole life. I'm the
Yeah.
older sister.
Yeah.
Whereas my husband came in, at a different time. We
Mm,
have a completely different relationship.
mhm.
And it's a similar discussion that I have with my children is their relationship with their now that they're adults, um, they get to design their relationship with their auntie.
Yeah.
When they were not adults, I was like, no, you're not going over to aunties.
Yeah.
You're not going over to the trap house to like rustle up. I mean, that's not happening.
Yeah.
Okay. But anyway, getting back to your question on what not to do, it is really important not to tell them what to do. Holding I'm going to flip it to where it's what to do is hold space for them
Mhm.
and then just have the discussion. I'm not saying that's easy. Maybe take them out for a meal, and there could be no friggin' talking. You're just holding space for
Yeah.
them to be and have a warm meal, and maybe that's it, you
Mhm.
know. My sister and I ended up setting up regular meeting times where I would buy her a meal. And there were often times I would just hold space and sit there while she ate, and I she would color. Um, um, and that's when she was in her depths. She,
Yeah.
you know. So, and I would the don't do I try to flip it and frame it in a positive. So I would bring her journals. I would bring her um coloring books. I would bring things that would fuel her and bring her back to who she was.
Yeah.
I knew who she was, and I could always see her. I could always see her, even when she was in her depths, Christina. I always saw her.
Yeah.
But me telling her what she should do and kind of sideways trying to control her, um, getting her to a doctor or getting her into rehab. Um,
It
that
only
was,
would
and
push
she's
her
a
away.
woman.
Yeah.
Pardon me?
It would probably push her away and not want to talk to you because the last thing someone wants to be told is what to do.
Exactly,
Yeah.
exactly, and how to do it, and there's this conditioned love aspect to that. Is
Mhm.
that if if you don't do it my way, then, that's going to affect our relationship.
Mhm.
And that's moving in a way where there's an um, unconditional love.
Mhm.
You know that this is good for them. You know that they appreciate this. You know that this is them. So do that. Or have the bumpers, like when you're doing the bowling and you're a little kid and they have the bumpers so
Yeah.
the ball doesn't go in the gutter. Put those bumpers to your relationship so
Mhm.
it doesn't go in the gutter, and start with the small stuff and build from there. And then that's building the relationship. But telling them how they should do it is really my way. And
Yeah.
I did that. I learned from it. Fortunately, our relationship is deep. And I'm just like, and there was a time I'm just like, you know what? She got mad at me too. She's like, you're just mad and being a bitch because I'm not doing things the way you want me to. And I said, you are 110% right.
Yeah.
I'm stepping back. And
Mhm.
that's when I learned this concept of, you hear about it a lot. It's called detaching with love. I reframed it to loving from afar
Oh, okay.
because detaching seemed like, oh, you're going to cut off the arm or you're going to cut off the connection.
Mhm.
Um, and I couldn't do that. I could not cut off my connection to her, but I could have safe space where I could have set my intentions and I could love her from afar. And there were times where that had to happen because it was just too harmful to me or my family um, to step in where she was. So I hope I answered your question with what not to do and then flipped it with with things that you can do.
No, totally. I think you've given great advice. I know a lot of families struggle with this, whether it's their children, their sisters, their brothers, even their parents. I mean, we do live, I mean, I think now more than ever, people are addicted to something, whether it's pills, cocaine, meth. I mean, the list
Mhm.
goes on. Everyone has a vice, and sometimes people take it to the next extreme and it takes over their lives. And I know it's a problem happening in almost every family. You can't really quite quote me on that, but I know it's happening a lot. And how were you able to spot like her high functioning addiction? Like, how can us or like people be on the lookout for someone who is a high functioning addict?
Right. Well, hindsight's 2020, of course.
Yeah, totally.
And I'm just going to add to your kind of list there of addictions. There's all kinds of addictions. There's food addictions. There's sex addictions. There's
Yeah.
all kinds of addictions, and it really gets down to how do we love these people in their suffering. Okay, that's
Mhm.
that's what it gets down to. Um, um, but yeah, how to spot a high functioning addict is basically, and now I can look back because at the time I had no clue.
Yeah.
I had no clue. Of course, when she's homeless and on the streets, it's pretty glaring in my face. Um, but I can look back now and see that her inability to manage the daily,
Mhm.
if the smallest things were overwhelming to her.
Yeah.
This and I mean, and this was a woman that was, captain of her college soccer team, and has a license as a counselor,
Yeah.
and her couldn't manage her schedule. And her employer at the time was not giving her the keys to the office. These I don't want to say should because I don't like to should on myself,
Mhm.
but there was always an excuse for some crisis that came up, and there was always a crisis coming up, whether there was a car wreck, or yeah, she lost her keys, or the employer wasn't giving her keys, or wasn't allowing patients or on her calendar.
Mhm.
Also, her physical appearance. She gained a lot of weight, And this is my sister, like I said before, she's a college athlete
Yeah.
and a marathon runner girl. And just, I am not an athlete. And so to see her physical appearance morph, and then there was a lot of, so like I said, my sister was a heroin and meth addict. So she would always wear long sleeves and the hoodies, and then she'd wear the hats that would cover her eyebrows because her her complexion and her eyebrow hair was going away. When I would ask about things like that, she was like, "Oh, it's a dermatological condition." Of course, my naive, I'm like, "Okay,
Oh,
makes
what's
sense
that
to me."
called?
You know, like I didn't know to be aware of those things. I didn't. I mean, I would be just like, "Are you okay?" And then there were some other things like panic attacks over minor things. Um, just an overstated response to a minor thing. Um, yeah, I said a lot. Sorry about that. But in hindsight, those are the things I can say. Yeah.
Yeah, no, just kind of like notice what you're noticing. Try to be on the alert for like some behavioral changes. And I think it also is important what you had mentioned, like the reaction to the small things, you know, and
Hmm.
noticing like the little crises in their life, like losing keys, losing the job, change in dress, change in
Hmm.
body,
Yeah.
you know,
And things like, oh, my rent money got stolen.
yeah,
You
just like
know.
weird stories.
And I'm like, okay, well then report let's report it to the police. But if she's like, if they're making drugs in their apartment and it got stolen by another junkie, that ain't happening. I know that now.
Yeah. Yeah. You're like, you're not going to get me this time. I know what's up.
Right. And then like the demise of relationships, like important relationships, like she was married and they were constantly fighting. And it didn't used to be that way. And so just and the way that they would would try to problem solve it was so yeah, those are some more indications.
Yeah. Just kind of be on high alert, notice what you're noticing. And it's okay to question. And sometimes I feel like it's almost like your intuition can kind of tell you what's going on, but you just don't want to believe it. So if your
Yeah.
intuition is kind of telling you something, most likely just try to listen to it, investigate it, but don't like be super prying on them and like
Hmm.
nip in their
Yeah.
face, like really what's going on. Just kind of be like
Hmm.
off on the side and just try to see what you can find out without them really knowing, I feel
Right,
like.
there's a fine line
Yeah.
between respecting their privacy as an adult, and then caring about them.
Hmm.
And another thing was I was never invited into the home, never invited into their apartment.
Mm.
And they would start not showing up to family events.
That's a
Um,
big sign when people, because they don't want to be around everyone because they're high or doing their
right. And
addiction,
there was
whatever
always
it
an
is, or they're
excuse.
ashamed, they feel ashamed. Like that's a huge sign is when they don't start showing up to the family events.
Right, and there was always an excuse like I have to work or I'm sick. Me, Michaela, I now know she was dope sick, that she wasn't really sick. But what was I doing? I was making chicken soup and pumpkin cookies and leaving them on her doorknob because they wouldn't allow me in. And now I know why.
Yeah.
Because there were probably needles and everything, and I freak out, and I'd be like, what the heck? But I know this in hindsight now. And so just kind of, yeah, trust your little instincts there. I'm just like, okay.
Yeah.
you know,
Well, your sister's very lucky to have you as a sister because, I can tell that you were very much there for her and you really investigated for your own self on how to be there without being pushed away. So, it's great that we have, people like you to share the knowledge, because I know that there's probably a lot of people that have loved ones, like I said, that are going through the addictions, and you want to just do everything you can to like just shake it out of them. And it really has to
Mhm.
be on their time. And, you know, learning through people that have experienced it is kind of the best way to learn, and makes you feel like you're really not alone in the process
100%.
too.
And
Um,
I felt so alone during that, and that nobody understood. And that's the more I which is why I wrote the book too, because I want people to know you're not alone. Here's what worked for me.
mhm.
And, you know, I'm here you go.
Yeah. Well, where can people find the book? How can people buy this book?
Yes, they can go on Amazon. When I released it in September, which is Recovery Month, and it shot to Amazon's #1 hot new release.
Oh,
So yeah, so they can get it
congratulations.
on Amazon. It's Sister Siren, a nonfiction about addiction, and a field guide on how to love an addict. And it's basically our family's journey from the moment we learned and she went to rehab a couple times. And into recovery and how she found her way there. I've included tips and tools of what worked for me. My sister wrote the prologue and my dad wrote the epilogue, so it kind of goes full circle. And yeah, we're just so happy that my sister found recovery, and we can step into um, caring for our parents now. Our parents are in their mid 70s, and so they're kind of going through our mother has Alzheimer's,
Mhm.
and our father just had a stroke. And I remember being one of the things I was afraid of, or that I had a resentment about, that I had to work on, one of those RFFs, was that I would have to care for my parents alone because she was going to shoot herself up to death.
Yeah.
And she is just, we are stepping in together to care for our parents. And I'm so blessed that she's still with us.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much, Michaela, for sharing your beautiful story. I'm sure the listeners got a lot of insight from it. And I really appreciate, the vulnerability that you had in writing the book as well. So thank you for listening to this week's episode of BookSmarts, Authors on Show. Don't forget to check out Michaela's book, Sister Siren, available on Amazon. And I hope to see you guys in the next one.
Thank you so much for having me on.